Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the TYR L-1 Lifter. So 3 pros that I have with the L1 Lifter is number 1, its width. If you're looking into this shoe, it is likely because you want a wider toe box with your weightlifting shoes. So if you constantly feel like your toes are being squeezed and things like Reebok Legacy Lifter 2s, Nike Romaleos models, and different Adidas Adipower models, then I do think you'll like the L1 Lifter. Compared to something like the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2, it is pretty easy to see the toe box difference over here in the TYR model. It has a nice wide anatomically built toe box, so I do think that a variety of foot anatomies will feel comfortable in this shoe. And if I had to compare this model's width to something like a barefoot shoe, I would say that it's most similar to like a Zero Shoes toe box construction. So if you've ever worn them, then you could kind of get a feel for how the L1 Lifter will fit and feel for your lifting needs. The second pro that I have with this model is that it's a pretty well-rounded weightlifting shoe. So not every weightlifting shoe I like for every style of workout. However, for squats, for my workouts where I was adding in more clean work, and then even for some accessories, this model does a pretty good job. And I think whether you are a beginner or you're a weathered lifter and you're looking into the shoe, I think it should perform really well for you. In squats, it's nice and stable with this TPU heel, has a nice level of tread with this outsole, and you get a nice level of midfoot security with this dual strap system. The third pro that I have with this model is that thus far it has been a pretty durable shoe. So I have not had any glaring issues yet with durability of this model. The Velcro has been pretty solid in the dual midfoot straps. We have a nice thick leather upper in this model. We have an extended outsole wrap up here on the toe box, and we have a pretty thick rubber outsole. So when it comes to durability, while obviously I'm only one data point and we need more folks to be testing the shoe, I do think that it should be pretty durable for most lifters and athletes. And if you're buying these to just squat in them once or twice a week, or just use them for a couple of sessions a week, honestly, I could see this model lasting you a while. So I do think it could be a worthwhile investment if that is something you're interested in, especially regarding the width of this toe box. So that being said, the durability of the shoe seems pretty solid thus far, but now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the L1 Lifter. So 2 cons that I have with the TYR L1 Lifter is number 1, I do not think this will be a great shoe for folks with narrow feet. So if you have a notably narrow foot, or if you're just wearing weightlifting shoes now and you never feel constrained with your shoe's toe box, honestly, you likely can pass on this shoe and you will be fine, because here's the thing, with wider toe boxes, I think a lot of times people get in their head where it's like wider is always better, but that's not necessarily the case. With every style of shoe, there is a level of individuality there. So if you have a narrower foot and you're swimming in this toe box, then I could see you sliding around in this model. I have a neutral width foot, and during one of my sessions I actually forgot socks, and so I was actually sliding when catching cleans in this model because I don't necessarily fully fill this toe box of the shoe when it comes to my foot's width. So that would definitely be something to think about. And then on top of that, if you do have a narrower foot, if you're trying to crank this bottom strap tight, it can get pretty close to the ground here. So similar to how the Nike Romaleos 2 would have a little bit of overhang over time, or for certain foot anatomies, I would say that would definitely be something I would consider with the TYR L1 Lifter if you have a narrower foot and you're looking to invest in this shoe. So I just think it's important to recognize the context of everybody's individual foot anatomy before necessarily going and dropping $200 on a shoe just because it has a wider toe box. Will that actually benefit you? Is that going to fit your foot anatomy accordingly? The second con that I have with the shoe is that it can run pretty hot. So it doesn't necessarily bother me because for most of my lifting sessions where I'm wearing this model, it's not for a very long time. So it's for my squats, it's for cleans, going into some maybe quad bias accessories. And so it doesn't really bother me to a huge extent. However, with this leather upper, it can get pretty hot. So what I've been doing is I've been wearing thinner no-show socks in this model, and that has helped. And it's also given me enough width then where I'm not sliding around nearly as much in the shoe. So if you are constantly battling hot and sweaty feet in your workouts, because I definitely do sometimes, that would definitely be something to think about with the shoe, which is your sock selection may be a little bit more important in this model than other shoes on the market. But overall, this shoe has been a pretty strong performer. But now let's talk about the L1 Lifter's performance. Hey, quick reminder, if you're watching this review and you like this content, you will likely like other content on my channel. Hopefully, I mean, that's the goal of the channel. So consider subscribing. It's free, takes 2 seconds, helps the channel grow. But now back to the video. So when it comes to the performance of the TYR L1 Lifter, I'm gonna break this section into 3 different parts. I'll talk about how this shoe performs for squats, more weightlifting style workouts, and then accessory movements. So for squats, I have thoroughly enjoyed this model. Because you are static and you're planted, you don't have much of an issue with sliding around in this model. And I do like the wider toe box for really gripping the floor and driving to the toes if I ever feel like I'm off balance. So I do like this model model a lot for squats. You have a nice grippy outsole, so I don't think you're gonna have any slip issues in the shoe. The midfoot security is solid. And with this model, you have a 21mm heel to toe drop. That comes out to about 0.83 inches, and that is most similar to the heel height of the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2. So if you do resonate with that heel height, especially for your squat mechanics, I could see that being a pro of the TYR L-1 Lifter for your performance. When it comes to more weightlifting style workouts, I've also enjoyed this shoe. Again, I like the midfoot security of this model, and I do like the toe box width. However, I think it really is important to understand that when you're getting more dynamic with your movement, especially when catching snatches and cleans, that is where you're going to want to be more conscious of your foot anatomy and how the shoe will fit, because obviously you don't want to be sliding into the sides of the shoe every time you go to catch a clean or snatch. And so while I am not a dedicated weightlifter, and that is not my sport, for my style of training sessions where I do like to blend in clean work and power cleans, this model has performed pretty well, and I have liked the level of stability and comfort you get with the shoe. So overall, I do think it will work, especially for folks who are much more recreational with their training, who like to add in more weightlifting style movements. And then when it comes to accessory movements, the shoe does a pretty good job. So if you're wanting to use them for leg presses, hack squats, different forms of lunges and split squats where you want an elevated heel, they'll work well. Just note that this model does run a little bit more stiff, especially when breaking them in through the base of the toe box. So this model took about like 1-2 weeks to really break in, and honestly, still to this day, I feel like I'm low-key breaking the shoe in. So if you are gonna be using the shoe for accessory movements on top of squats and Olympic lifts, then just note that there will likely be a grace period where you're gonna have to break them in, and also note that they do run a little bit hot. So if you are gonna be using the shoe for a longer session where you're doing a lot of different exercises where you do want an elevated heel, whether it be for quad bias and tension, whatever, you might want to be a little bit more strategic with your sock choice with this model because she run hot. When it comes to price in the TYR L-1 Lifter, you can expect to pay $199.99 USD. That price point is similar to the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2 and the Nike Romaleos 4. So it is a little bit more premium in nature. However, it does have that kind of niche, wider toe box. So if that is something you're after, then I do think that price can be justified. And again, the durability of the shoe has seemed pretty solid. So if you're just going to be using these recreationally, so once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, they should last you a while too. So your investment should last a while in this model. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should invest in the TYR L-1 Lifter? I kind of feel like this section is pretty self-explanatory. Skinny toe box. It no fit. Now I go wide. No, but I might have broke something. But seriously, I think if you are somebody who is regularly training in weightlifting shoes, and after your sessions you feel like your feet are either super constrained or you just feel like they're a little bit uncomfortable due to the width of your normal weightlifting shoes, then the L1 Lifter could be worth looking into. You are going to get a wider toe box. It is a little bit more anatomical in nature, so it doesn't have as sharp of a taper. So I do think it will fit a range of foot anatomies a little bit better, especially if you are used to wearing minimalist shoes or barefoot shoes for that matter, and you like that level of width there. So in that context, this model will fit. Now again, if you do have narrower feet, I would say tread lightly when looking into the shoe to make sure if it actually fits your foot anatomy, because just because it has a wider toe box, that does not mean it's necessarily going to be the shoe for every single lifter and athlete. So when it comes to the sizing and fit in the TYR L-1 Lifter, I think it's going to vary a little bit from athlete to athlete. So I have a neutral width foot, and I found this model to fit true to size. If I was sockless in this model, I had a little bit of width up here in the toe box, but I never had an issue with length. And then if I wore socks, this model did fit a little bit more snug and true when it comes to its overall length and width. Now, I have had some lifters and athletes reach out and say that they found that this model ran a little bit short. And so when you look at the shoe compared to something like a Legacy Lifter 2, it does run a smidge shorter, especially if we look at where the boot lands on each model. And it's also a little bit shorter than the Adidas Adipower 3. So if you do have a wider foot, I think you might want to size up a half size, because I think with this wider toe box, it's going to feel a little bit more abrupt on the end of your toes. So that would definitely be something to look into. So if you have a neutral width foot, I think you should be safe going true to size. But if you are worried about length, or if you have a wider foot, go up a half size in this model, because I think that will be a safer call. And before we take out the sizing section, let's go ahead and look at the TYR L-1 Lifter's toe box compared to some other popular weightlifting shoes. All right, so now let's do some toe box width comparisons. I am freestyling this, so I apologize if the camera's a little bit shaky, but I tried to line up these 5 models to where the boots are all in a nice line, so you can get a true idea of the length of each shoe, because with the flared heels of some of these models, if you put them against the wall, it can look a little bit off. So we have the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2 here, the TYR L-1 Lifter, the Innovate Fast Lift 360, the Adidas AdiPower 3, and the Nike Remalios 4. So looking at the toe box widths, it's pretty easy to see that the TYR model is the widest of these shoes. And so you can see like these have an aggressive taper compared to the wider toe box of the TYR model. And I also put the Innovate next to the TYR because it low-key does look kind of funny. This model looks like a little kid shoe compared to the TYR, but I did want to give you guys an idea of the context of the width of these different models' toe boxes. If you're going to go with a wider shoe, definitely go TYR. The Reebok Legacy Lifter 2, Adidas AdiPower 3 work pretty well for neutral width feet, and then for slightly narrower feet, the Innovate and Nike models work really well. So that's a good range of weightlifting shoes with different widths if you are on the market for a new model. So when it comes to the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the TYR L-1 Lifter, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 19.10 ounces. This model's heel to toe drop is 21 millimeters. That comes out to 0.83 inches, and this model does have a removable insole. It is a little bit more rigid in nature, and we do have some nice sidewalls going from the midfoot into the heel of this shoe's insole. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the TYR L-1 Lifter. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up over this toe. It is biased towards the medial side of this shoe, and we also have a nice grippy rubber outsole. It does have a slightly different tread patterning from the forefoot to the heel. And then looking at the midsole material, we have a TPU heel in the shoe, so it is very sturdy and very stable. It does feel nice and rigid too when you are lifting on it. Looking at the upper of the shoe, we have a leather upper that extends from the forefoot to the midfoot into the heel. We also have a mesh padding back here around the boot, so you have a nice blend of mesh and leather. Once again, this model does run pretty hot, even though there's ventilation up here in the toe box. We have dual straps here on the midfoot. So there's one area where I would like to improve the shoe. It's with the Velcro system, honestly, and I wish they would use metal loops because I do think that would also help give the shoe another boost on durability. But regarding its Velcro, I wish this Velcro was a little bit more rigid. I worry because it's not as aggressive as other Velcros if it's gonna last in dirtier gyms. So that would definitely be something to keep an eye on. You might need to keep this clean if you are gonna be storing these, especially in a smaller gym where it can run a little bit more dusty. And then looking at the midfoot construction, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyelets that wrap up, and we have a padded mesh tongue that does have a loop for additional security. So I don't think you're gonna have issues with tongue security at all. There's also a little bit of a gusset down here on the tongue as well. On the lateral side of the shoe, we have some pretty grandiose TYR branding. TYR, can we bring this down next model? Honestly, less is more. And then we also have some TYR branding up here on the medial toe box. This isn't as bad. It's a little bit more subtle in nature, but whew, that is a lot of branding. And then once again, we do have that removable insole, which was a pain to get out, and that's why I left it out a little bit in that prior clip. But we do have an insole here that is removable. It's a little bit more rigid through the midfoot and the heel, so this part of the insole is a little bit more stable, whereas up here in the forefoot, it's like this more dense foam. So I do like that because it does add a little bit of comfort up here on the forefoot. But overall, that wraps up the construction of the TYR L-1 Lifter. If you have additional questions on this model's construction, hit me in the comments below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the TYR L-1 Lifter. Overall, I have really enjoyed this model. I also like that TYR has made this model because it adds more sizing inclusivity to the weightlifting shoe market. So if you have a wider foot, this would definitely be a model to explore, especially if you don't really resonate with all the other weightlifting shoes on the market at the moment. If you have additional questions on the L-1 Lifter, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.